And welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast. Almost at LSU. I guess that's a sign I'm doing too many podcasts. This is the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, September 24th. I'm Zach Ewing here today with Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan. And this is the only Saints podcast where we don't need air conditioning. It's hot in here, and I'm just going to call it out publicly. Like, why can't the air conditioning work in our studio, guys? Could we get that fixed? Like, it's hot in here.
Yeah,
it's like special teams, man. You just can't fix it.
It's hot in here. The Saints are not hot. The Saints lost 44-13 to the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday. The two of you were there. Rod, I like Seattle a lot, but I feel kind of lucky that we were not in attendance for that.
Yeah, it's like
game.
One of my favorite cities to travel to, but kind of glad I didn't go to that one. Was that game scoregami, by the way?
It was not. I think it was like 6 times before. More than I thought.
Okay.
More than I thought. So the Saints go to Buffalo this week, where it will also not be that cool. It's like in the 70s, which I know you're thankful for, Rod, because that's your road trip, and you don't like the cold.
Right. I was hoping for 80s or something, but
yeah,
80s might be on the scoreboard though.
Well, let's kind of dig into that because this was like, I mean, Matt, this was as bad as it gets for a team. I mean, 44-13, I don't think does justice to what happened to the Saints on Sunday. Like, this game was over 10 minutes in, and it was pretty discouraging.
It was. I mean, the special teams blunders that Rod mentioned, but Seattle really let up. Like, they got whatever they wanted in the passing game, and they only threw 18 times. Like, they were getting big chunk plays. The Saints weren't pressuring Sam Darnold hardly at all, and so many things went wrong that it probably can't get much worse, but I think it was more of I like what Jeff wrote after the game. It was really kind of a reminder that this team does have serious problems. The honeymoon's over, and after 2 scrappy competitive weeks, this was kind of a wake-up call.
Yeah, and I think even more discouraging. I mean, the special teams blunders can be a little bit of fluky. You know, I don't know if we'll see those week to week. That kind of started the ball rolling. I think the more discouraging thing for me was, just how sloppy they played, the execution across the board, and the effort. I was talking to Rod earlier about just how, I spend a lot of time. One of the advantages of being at the game is being able to watch the sidelines and see a lot of the interactions and then be, of course, in the locker room afterwards or be in the, corridors where you see things you can't see from the television. And just watching that sideline, they were not into that game, at least, visually what you expect, right? You see energy, you see enthusiasm, you see guys getting after it with each other. That was absent, like 7-0. It was not absent. I'm not talking about the third quarter when the game was over. I'm talking about early on. It was absent, and I think it led to that result. That is on the staff. That's on Kellen Moore. That's on the veteran leaders of the team. That's discouraging 3 games in. We're not talking about week 16 here where they're out of it. You're in week 3, and you should be hungry to try and get a win. We saw Carolina rise up and get a big win, right? I mean, I didn't see that. I didn't see a hungry team at all. And to me, that's a big red flag.
Was that rise up intentional, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know.
Who did Carolina get that win against? I agree with you. I think it was really bad. I think we're going to dig into some of the points why it was maybe even worse than the score made it look. Some of those things you're talking about, the attitude, the effort, and really just the discipline. And then maybe we'll give a few reasons to hope that was rock bottom and the Saints can dig out from there.
Probably very few reasons, but
a few, yeah. There might be a couple. Okay. But first, we should let you know that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. New deposit customers can reach out today to learn about incredible rate specials. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. So as far as just why this was bad, I was doing a little bit of stat head research. There have been 8 games so far in the NFL decided by 20-plus points. And the Saints had the most penalties of any of those teams. They had the most penalty yardage of any of those teams. They had the fewest turnovers. So it's, a lot of these games, there was a couple, it was tied. They had 1 turnover. There's a couple other games where there was 1 turnover. So it's not just like, like the Bengals, for instance, got waxed in Minnesota on Sunday, but that was 5 turnovers. I mean, that happens when things snowball on you. So it wasn't that. And the Saints had the most time of possession of any of those teams that lost by 20-plus points. So when I say that to you, Matt, I just see a lack of discipline. I see a lack of being ready to go. And like you said, almost just the second half was almost like a scrimmage. Like it could have been that much worse.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Saints were, just look at the way Seattle was defending New Orleans. It was, 15-play drives, then you can only get a field goal out of it. Like, that game was over, but they are really undisciplined. And I think that's been a through line through these 3 games, which is probably the most discouraging part of the season so far, is these guys are a mess pre-snap, whether it's illegal shifts, false starts. There's just a lack of attention to detail, and that's where, if you are going to question the coaching staff, I feel like that falls a lot on coaches to make sure the guys know what they're doing or to time things up right. And I keep harping on it, but I think the tush-push play is specific, a great example of how they approached training camp. They didn't show it really at all to reporters. Maybe they practiced it in walkthroughs and stuff. But you ask anyone about that play, and it takes reps upon reps upon reps. They did not drill those reps in training camp, and they've run it 2 times in the season, and they've false started on each. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't.
And to your point, if you look at the penalties that the Saints have suffered, it's across the board. It's not like the Cowboys backup left tackle had 4 or 5 penalties. I mean, literally every starter on the offensive line has at least 2 infractions of different kinds. Olave has got 3. He drifts in his motions. It's been a problem all the way back to last year. It hasn't been corrected. So, to Matt's point, that falls back on the coaching staff. At some point, they've got to correct that. Now, I think there's a new staff. Kellen Moore's a young coach. He's going to get time and a runway to fix these things, but I didn't expect it to be this pervasive from Kellen Moore this quickly in the year. We talk about this team being a young team. I think that's a little bit misleading. I mean, most of the starters on this team are veteran guys that have been playing a while. And so I know it's a new staff, but we shouldn't be seeing 8 false starts in 3 games. That's unacceptable.
One of the things I asked Kellen Moore about on Monday was, they brought in officials for practice during training camp. They did it again. I don't know if it was last week or the week
After week 1.
After week 1. And I asked him, are you seeing those penalties in practice? And he said, they see a few, but he said he's just kind of surprised how that's not translating over to the games. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the game. And I don't know what the crowd was like in Seattle. I don't know if that had a lot to do with it or not, but it can't happen.
It's happening at home, too.
It's happening at home, right.
Yeah.
One thing Justin Reed said in the locker room after the game was that it's kind of hard to replicate the full speed in practice. And so, when you're not going as fast as you are during games, it's you're more prone to error, I guess, was his kind of viewpoint of it.
That kind of brings up an interesting thing that I've been thinking about. And that's Kellen Moore all through OTAs, through minicamp, training camp. It was very sort of, and we mentioned this when training camp started. Maybe it was just they don't feel the pressure because they know this is a rebuilding year, and maybe that's the case. But he was sort of exuding this calm and this confidence that, hey, I know what I'm doing. Things are going to work out, and we don't need to do a bunch of padded practices, for instance. We don't need to do a bunch of discipline. We don't need to do that. Was Kellen Moore maybe overconfident in how well he was going to be able to hit the ground running? Is that a fair question?
I think it's a fair question. I don't know if I agree with it. I think what they were able to do with within those time constraints, they still ran a ton of plays. They were efficient with their time. It's just what are you focusing on in those periods? I think, for instance, their emphasis on tempo. There have been some pre-snap penalties with that, but I think the tempo aspect of this offense has actually looked pretty good, and they've spent a lot of time on it. And so I do think there are areas where they practice that they are getting the results from. I guess my thing is the stuff that they didn't practice or that they put less of an emphasis on, I think is coming back to bite them.
And I think also, he indicated this week he's going to dial some of the stuff back. Maybe he's got a little too much too soon. I think that's smart. So we do have to realize, he's a first-time head coach. He's young. He's going to be learning on the fly. It's going to exacerbate some of the problems with this team. Now we just have to see if he does, in fact, make the corrections, if they do work, because that's all about what head coaching is like, fixing these issues, finding solutions to these problems. But to your point, maybe he was a little overconfident in that, right? A little misjudgment, throwing too much at this team, maybe thinking he had all these veterans. But somewhere along the way, it's not being effectively communicated or executed. There's just way too many infractions. This team isn't good enough to overcome, 1st and 15.
And I don't even know. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, even going back to the penalties, though, I remember back in training camp, somebody would false start and he'd take them out. And we're like, oh, he's holding these guys accountable.
Yeah.
But that's not really fixing it. You just took a guy out and put somebody else in. So I think when you look at it that way, maybe it wasn't as – maybe they weren't being as accountable as we thought.
And that's fascinating because that doesn't happen during the games where it's different. Like, they didn't take Brian Brzee out after the 15-yard penalty, like after Stallbird. And so, like, it is very it's really fascinating. It just reminded me of that. That's a great point.
I was not a huge fan of Kellen's body language during the game. And you talked about the players. But you got a lot of crossed arms. We have it on the screen right now. You got a lot of palms up. What's going on? And I understand, like, you're getting beat by 30. Like, that's, to a certain extent, that's going to happen. But it felt a little bit like, the first 2 weeks we lost close games. We're right there. I know what I'm doing. And it felt like he was a little bit at a loss on Sunday. And he probably was in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I would always be careful to, like, judge body language too much. Like, I think what Jeff was talking about earlier, it does matter of how the guys are reacting in general, but Kellen Moore is not a scream-in-your-face type of coach.
That's true.
And so I think there are ways, like, I think, to me, for Kellen Moore, it's a matter of, like, what is his attention to detail in terms of actually fixing these problems? Mm-hmm. Does he cut back in key areas? Like, what does he actually identify to help be the solution going forward? Not so much is he upset on the sideline.
Yeah, he's got to be authentic to who he is. I think people would look at him crossways if he was trying to be Sean Payton. That's not who he is. That sounds like a good story.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He's got to be who he is. But I do think you make a good point of, like, he's got to win this locker room over with his coaching ability and his X's and O's, his game plans. That will get buy-in. He got buy-in in the offseason, and I think a lot of it was with being positive and optimistic. This was kind of a beaten-down team from the Dennis Allen era. He came in with a different vibe, and players bought in, especially the leaders of this team. That's only going to go so far, though. At some point, you got to win. You got to prove to these professional football athletes that you've got the goods, and eventually that will, I think, be the deciding factor of the buy-in in the locker room. But I think he's still got it. I don't think he's lost the locker room, but I think he's not going to be a ranter or raver. Now, I do think somewhere they've got to find a way to get the intensity level of the team ratcheted up, because I think we heard Rattler after the game, right, say, well, we got to be just more dialed in. I'm like, well, why are you not dialed in? I mean, why not? Why aren't you dialed in?
You only get 17 of these things.
Yeah.
But even when he hired, because when they hired him, we knew he was a young coach, so we were thinking, okay, you bring in a Brandon Staley, somebody who's been a head coach for, and maybe they can be the bad cop and you be the good cop. And I just don't know if that's happening either.
And to be clear, like, my criticism of his body language, I wasn't really expecting fire and brimstone and getting in guys' faces. Like, that's not authentic to him. But what he has been is very positive, and that went away quick. And again, I get it, when you're down by 21 points that fast into the game, like, it's hard to be positive. But I would have liked to see a little more, like, come on, let's. And again, I'm watching on TV. I'm not seeing him on the sideline every snap or anything like that. But I would have liked to see a little more positivity in a bad situation, because this is a rebuilding season. And whether they want to call it that or not, we all know that it is. And sitting there and getting upset the first time you take one of these beatings, it's probably not going to be the last. I'm not sure is the way to go.
Yeah, you want him just to be honest in what's happening. And the positivity is fine. It's just, like, when you ask him questions after the game, how direct is he in some of the answers? How, like, does he speak in generalities, or does he like have specifics of what went wrong. And it's kind of been a mixed bag there. I know media answers aren't everything, obviously, but it's just a matter of, like, are you honest with yourself and what's happening? And
yeah, I think there's a way to do both, right?
Yeah.
He sounds like he's very committed in his answers when he's speaking to the media. I think almost all of it is thinking about what effect it'll have on the locker room. It feels that way to me, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a way to kind of do both.
Balance it, yeah.
To address what the public and the fans want to hear and still not throw everybody on the team on the bus under the bus. And I think he's learning that. We'll see how much better he gets, but he's got a long ways to go right now.
And to be fair, none of this is important compared to how they react to it. I mean,
Correct.
And we're going to turn the page here after we take a break and kind of talk about where they can go from here, why it's not necessarily the end of the world. And if they do go back to the way they were those first 2 weeks, win a few games here and there, they're competitive, we'll look back at this as just a bad week, and that's fine. Everybody has those. It's just if that becomes a sign of things to come, then the Saints are in trouble.
Banking has come to a crossroads. Do you want to bank with an actual bank, with actual people? You know, one that you can walk into or drive through, get real help from a real person. Or do you want a bank that lives inside your phone? A digital bank that gives you control of your money anywhere, anytime. Well, why not both? Bank Plus, a partner in your corner, wherever that may be.
Did they ask you to do the commercial too?
Yeah, but they just gave me one line.
Bet like a Caesar. Like, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna tell them how Caesar's Sportsbook is just so easy to use that you can watch and bet thousands of sports events, even some NFL games.
They'll probably show us betting on our favourite players and teams at all the Vegas hotspots too.
Like, we have time for that montage.
I told him I couldn't do it.
They couldn't afford me.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider Podcast. You can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. It is New Orleans Saints at NOLA.com. Join the thousands of people subscribed. Sign up for notifications. Leave a comment as to what you thought of the Saints' performance in Seattle. Was this rock bottom? Is there even deeper depths to dig to? I don't know.
Let me say one quick thing that we were talking about earlier about the you were talking a little more like of resignation with Kellen Moore, right?
Yeah.
And I heard him on his coach's show Monday night, and I thought it was interesting. I didn't think about this during the game. You remember, was it right before halftime where they had a little 2-minute drive and they got down, they ended up settling for a field goal? And Mike Haas asked Kellen about, I think it was like 5 seconds or 7 seconds on the play clock, and how come he didn't get the timeout a little earlier? Because I think somebody got knocked down and they didn't get the timeout till 3 seconds. Then there's no choice but to kick the field goal at that point. And he said, why, if you'd gotten 5 seconds, could you have run a play? He said, yeah. And he said the official explained that he didn't see him the timeout. And it was just this kind of resigned answer. And I'm just thinking, that's not good enough. I mean, I think what people want to hear is him go, no, that's on you all. Argue a little more, have a little more fire. That's just who Kellen Moore is. I think that's who he is. He's not going to argue his way to get that extra 2 seconds put on the clock. And I just feel like, hopefully he gets to that point because that was a big play. If they get a touchdown there, maybe they kind of eke back in a little more.
How many coaches around? I mean,
now it's the optimism segment.
Okay, the final score again. It was over at that point anyway. But I do like that point because how many coaches around the NFL? They'd literally be screaming at the official to get the timeout in time. And if you didn't hear me, it's certainly not because I wasn't screaming loud enough. I mean, even guys like Sean McVay, who's known as a mild-mannered, players coach, you see him sprinting down the sideline. Well, not right now. You don't because he's on one of those little push cart things. But you see him, being vocal with the officials and getting the timeout and getting red in the face and stuff. And I think Kellen Moore probably will need to grow into that a little bit.
Yeah, he's got a ways to go. I mean, this clock management 101 though.
True.
That should be his
along
top.
with the Arizona timeout situation.
He knows the play. He knows the play call. He should be finding the official before they even snap it to be there because of the limited amount of time that was on the clock right there.
Right. Okay, so we are going to kind of turn the page and look a little bit forward. And I thought it was interesting. Luke Johnson, who's not here, obviously, is doing a story about other teams. Saints are playing Buffalo this week. They're one of them who have gone through some difficult times in recent years and had losses like the Saints had last week. The Detroit Lions are another one. He came up with a specific example. Lions lost by like 35 points to an Eagles team that wasn't very good at the time. They were like 2-5 and had missed the playoffs the year before. And there's a Detroit columnist who says this is rock bottom and this is embarrassing. And it was Dan Campbell's first year. And I think the lesson there is that these things do happen when you're rebuilding and that they do not mean the end of the world, Rod.
Yeah, and that's one of the things Kellen Moore talked about on Monday. He talked about a game last year, and obviously Philadelphia was much better than the Saints team, but they lost to Tampa Bay like 33-14 or 16, so whatever it was. And that was week 4 of the season. I think the Eagles were like 2-2 at the time, and then they ended up running off like 6 or 7 straight wins. And he talked about a time when he was in Dallas and they lost to the Broncos. And so teams do bounce back, but I mean, they're not going to bounce back if they're still, getting out of penalties. So I wouldn't put too much into what these other teams have done. But I think you're going to go through a time like that, and eventually they'll get out of it. But I don't know if we should be expecting them to get out of it like this season. I think this is kind of who this team is.
And the context of this conversation is that they go play the Bills next, Matt. Like you can't. You're not going to expect this massive turnaround and some huge seismic upset in Buffalo this week. But I do think there's a possibility that this was the bottom and that they are, not quite that bad. I sure hope they're not that bad.
Yeah, let's see Sunday because the Bills are awesome. But I think it's also reflective of where the roster's at currently, to be frank. Like, the reason it was rock bottom for Detroit a couple of years ago is because that roster was not anywhere in the shape that it is now. Like, they drafted well over the next few years. They acquired the right pieces. Any other rebuild, to be a successful rebuild, you need to bring in the right players. And I think this roster right now is very much a group in transition. You look at the defense, they're running so much zone and trying different ways to create these pressures, but I don't think these are the guys that Brandon Staley, it's right to execute his scheme in the long term, and I just think it's going to take a year or two to find those fits.
Yeah, that defense is probably a 2-year minimum transition, and they're at the very beginning of it. So, but I do think one difference I would say, Rob made a good point. If they would have maybe won one of those first 2 games, then you could say, well, but they lost both those, and then you get woodshed whipped out there, and now you're playing maybe the best team in the league. It's hard to look past that. And 2 things I keep coming back to were the sloppiness of the execution and the effort. Those are 2 things that they are in total control of.
Right.
And Kellen talked about that. They're already at a talent deficit, like Matt said. They can control effort and execution level of pre-snap penalties, and that's very discouraging. So I think there is reason to think that Kellen Moore and his staff need a long runway, and he's a sharp coach and all his track record, but it's fully fair to criticize what we saw on Sunday, regardless of how young the roster is or how young the coaching staff is. That was unacceptable.
If Sunday's game was against Buffalo instead of Seattle, and we're saying that we saw the same score, I don't know if we would be as critical.
Oh, I thought you were going to say if the Saints played like they did Sunday against Buffalo.
I'm just saying if this 44-13 game was against Buffalo instead of Seattle, we'd probably be like, oh, okay, it's Buffalo. But it was just Seattle. Seattle's good. Probably might be a playoff team. I'm not even sure if
they're on the
borderline playoff team.
Yeah. So I think that's what makes it even more concerning.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. They put in their backup quarterback for the whole 4th quarter, man. Right. They basically did what they did in 3 quarters.
Right.
Yeah, it was obviously bad. I do think this upcoming homestand after the Buffalo game becomes really important. Not for a playoff run or anything, or wins and losses or anything like that, but just for the vibes, right? Because you're probably losing by double digits in Buffalo. Maybe you can get back some goodwill by playing them tough and losing by 7 or 10 or something. And so, look, they played Buffalo tough. But if you don't start winning a game at some point, this starts to get ugly, I think, both outside and inside the locker room.
Yeah, just how many Like, how many times can you do the same thing over and over before you have to make changes? Like, this is where I think the quarterback conversation kind of starts. Spencer Rattler has done a fine job through the first 3 games here. If he loses Sunday, I don't think anyone is going to say it was directly on the quarterback. It's just now you're going to be 0-10 as a starter in your career. Like, how many times can they keep running him out there before they go to Tyler Shuck? But, you know, he deserves a chance to at least play it out. And that's what, Kellen Moore recognized that in training camp. And I think Spencer Rattler has done a fine job. It's just, you know, how many times can you do the same thing before you start making changes, quarterback or elsewhere?
I like Rattler's demeanor, though. I think he's staying poised, staying optimistic. Like, he's doing all the right things as the leader of the team. You know, he's just not getting a lot of help around him. I mean, like, he's obviously got things he's got to do better. His evaluation or his grades were really bad in that game, and he threw a couple balls that easily could have been picked.
Yeah.
That didn't get picked. So he's got to play a little better, but, you know, it's going to happen with Tyler Shuck, too. So, you know, I think that the front office has to decide on these it has to be a collaborative decision with the staff and the front office when they start making some of these changes. But you can already see some of these wheels in motion with how many young players they're already rotating in. You know, the Quincy Rileys and guys like that, or Isaiah Stallberg was out there early in the pass rush rotation. So I think they're starting to trend that way. But that'll be a franchise decision. You know, I think everyone will make those decisions.
Well, on that topic, we'll have a full preview pod of Saints Bills on Friday, and such as it is, maybe see how bad our predictions get. But like, I'm curious to know if you guys think there will be any noticeable changes. I mean, like, weekly announcement is Wednesday morning. We haven't seen an injury report, but it looks like Trevor Penning is probably trending toward being back, Matt, and Chase Young maybe also. Like, so from that standpoint, they'll get some key guys back up front. Do you think we'll see anything else, whether it's a nod to a youth movement, whether it's just a game plan change, something, anything?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I do think Quincy Riley's going to start playing more, but I don't think he's going to, like, be the starter over Ike Yadam, for instance. I just think, like, they'll start having a little bit more of a rotation there. And same thing with Danny Stutzman or Isaiah Stallberg. Like, they're just going to get these guys a little bit more on the field in certain spots, but it's not going to be a full-fledged, like, youth movement.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of owe it to the veteran players, too. I mean, they got to try and win, so they don't want to wave the white flag, but I do think they have to have the short-term and long-term goals, meeting those, and that's a little bit of a recipe that Matt's talking about.
I would just like to see, Rod, just very simply the pre-snap penalties. Again, on the road, you're probably not totally getting rid of them, but they need to get cut in half or more.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the main thing. And even if you find out it's a certain offensive lineman, I mean, I don't know if you even have the depth to replace them. Who are you going to put out there? It'll only get worse. I mean, these guys are starting because that's the best 5 guys they got. So I don't know if you can fix it with personnel changes, but, yeah, you need to fix it in practice or do it. And I don't know what it's going to take to do it, but he mentioned simplifying things, so maybe that's what they'll have to do.
But to me, that's a sign like that Kellen Moore identified a problem, and even though it took him another week or two than we would have liked to see it fixed, he fixed it. If he doesn't fix it after everyone has seen what a glaring issue it is, and he's even admitting it's a glaring issue, that's a red flag to me if he can't get that fixed.
Yeah, I mean,
next week.
That's coaching.
I mean, I also wonder how complicated Kellen Moore's offense is to the players. They're running a lot of bubble screens. They're doing a lot of short throws. Like, it doesn't seem like it's reinventing the wheel, acknowledging that these guys know, like, much more about football than I do. It just seems like there are guardrails in place, I think rightfully so, to try and make Spencer Rattler's life a little bit easier, but it doesn't seem like they're asking players to do, like, all these sorts of complex stuff, even though football is obviously a complex sport in general.
I tell you, that's a good point. I tell you the other thing that I think fans particularly would like. I think everybody's resigned themselves to this rebuilding season, but I think people like to see them be a little more maybe aggressive, if that makes sense, or, throw caution to the wind, be a little mini Dan Campbell out there, something to show some life. You know, there's just, if you're going to get beat, like, go down swinging.
He went for it on 4th and 2 on the first possession, man.
and then kicked a field goal down
No.
28, 21
Yeah,
nothing.
I think people would like to see a little more swashbuckler in Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the post game on Sunday, but I want, maybe not this week, but eventually he's got to decide what his identity is. Is he going to be the risk taker? Is he going to be more conservative? I mean, it seems like he's a little bit all over the map. Like he's still trying to figure that out himself right now.
Yeah, he's just very much going it based on vibes. And,
Yeah.
You know,
What's my gut tell me?
yeah, Blake Groupie missed a field goal in week 2. Okay, we're gonna punt and pass up a 50-yard or 59-yard field goal. Like, it's just very much a what have you done for me lately? And I don't necessarily think that's a bad strategy. It's just you've got to kind of learn your way into it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That is our podcast for today.
Can I just interrupt one last thing?
Of course you can, yeah.
I want to give a hat tip to Rod with his Earth, Wind, and Fire reference in his column this week.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, that was,
You're going to remember the 21st of September.
yeah. Any Earth, Wind, and Fire references, I'm all for. Hopefully, it got a lot of likes and clicks.
You're this pod's shining star. So
How will we remember the 21st of September? Was it the day we found out that this regime is not going to work that early, or was it just a blip on the radar? Too early to say, but we will start to find out again. This weekend, we'll be back Friday. We'll preview Saints Bills. We will make our predictions. Anybody leaning Saints? Anybody leaning Saints on their predictions?
Shock the world, baby.
Maybe Luke is. Norm, you leaning Saints? Norm just laughing. All right, we'll be back on Friday. We'll talk about it then. Here on the Saints Insider, for our producer, Norman Bell. He's Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan. I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you for watching.
I like the shining